Amnesia the Bunker needs no introduction. The game received several nominations for awards, and although it did not win any, it has gone on to earn great esteem in horror communities as a fantastic return to relevance for such a juggernaut franchise in the indie horror genre. Sequels to the first game in the series, Amnesia: The Dark Descent, have historically been controversial to say the least. I don't think I need to get into too much detail with all of that. If you clicked on this video, chances are you're at least in some way familiar with the franchise. But just in case, here's a brief overview. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is a masterpiece in the zeitgeist of 2000s gaming, and if you're a millennial or an elder Gen Z like myself, then there's little doubt that at some point or another, your phone or computer screens have been graced by gameplay of The Dark Descent, accompanied by footage of a screaming YouTuber in the corner. The 2010s were truly a simpler time. The second game, however, like many a maligned sequel, was received poorly at first, before going on to earn some acclaim for its well-written and well-acted story and its incredible soundtrack. Though overall being deemed a misstep following such a well-received first entry, I enjoy the story of this game quite a lot. And I think that this distinction of story versus gameplay being made so early in the franchise no doubt had a massive part to play in the development of the bunker, but I'll touch on this again in just a bit. Then Amnesia Rebirth came out. I haven't played this game, but I did watch Jacksepticeye and a few others play it when it came out, and I really liked delving into the more cosmic or Lovecraftian aspects of this series. This was a bold choice, however, and not everyone's cup of tea. The game received criticism for its hand-holding linearity and story direction, and unfortunately also received criticism because of its female protagonist. But that's just an unfortunate side effect of the era in which we live. I tend to ignore criticism when the only modus of argument is woke because woman. There are plenty of badly written characters that are preachy and posturing in media, but this game's protagonist and story isn't one of those. Let me know if you think this game would be a good topic for a video. Forgive my digression here, but I felt it absolutely crucial to mention the direction the series was headed leading up to the bunker. While Rebirth on paper was a return to form, so to speak, it was almost too much a return to form. While following a formula works for modern shooter battle pass brain rot, of which I do unfortunately participate, as I am a product of the early 2000s and still hold out hope for the return of the multiplayer shooter glory days, but anyway, in the horror genre, form or formula can be a bad thing for franchises. While some can seemingly keep getting away with it, like the extremely polished modern RE engine games, I would almost put those sorts of games more into the shooter with horror themes genre. For today's purposes, we're looking at a very pure form of survival horror. And the main focus of this video essay thing that I do today will be about why Amnesia the Bunker is a highly concentrated, incredibly distilled, yet deep vertical slice of pure survival horror with Metroidvania, immersive sim, and roguelite design philosophies, and also why it has one of my favorite monster designs in horror gaming. And I know that a few of you groaned at the mention of Metroidvania and immersive sim, which I totally understand, as these terms get much use and much overuse in the talking about a video game genre of YouTube video. And often these discussions turn into the speaker attempting to convince an already convinced audience that a game is or isn't this genre, instead of talking about a game's nuances and elements, with that being an initial thesis for the topic, but exploring why a game is inherently compelling and important on a more personal level, which is kind of what I aim to do. To get this out of the way early, I'll explain these game journalisty terms in the simplest of definitions. Metroidvania is a subgenre of action-adventure games focused on non-linear exploration of a large, interconnected world map. Players unlock new areas by acquiring specific abilities, tools, or power-ups, requiring frequent backtracking. Immersive sim, a design philosophy rather than a strict genre, focused on creating a believable, interactive world where players have high agency to solve problems through interconnected and logical systems. Roguelite is a subgenre of video game featuring procedural generation and permadeath, with an emphasis on item collection and survival. I ripped these definitions straight off of a quick Google search, which seems to have ripped these definitions from several Reddit threads and gaming journalist articles, but I went through them and I couldn't find any flaw, and I believe that these are concise and mostly accurate definitions. Amnesia the Bunker checks these boxes, almost to the point where I imagine they literally had like a whiteboard of boxes with these design elements next to them that they were hand-selecting as key design philosophies during game production. Many other games check these boxes in smaller segments to great effect within themselves, but then transition into the linear, more focused parts. Think of a segment in a game where you were very obviously in the central hub level. You keep coming back until you find what you need, and then you can progress the story to the next linear set piece or even the next hub. Tons of games across multiple genres use these elements games like God of War to Tomb Raider, even a mission or two in a modern Call of Duty title. A little part where we engage in these design principles without making them the main focus of the game, so to speak. Horror games and more open world games use these principles to greater effect, due to the nature of the story generally being some kind of mystery. This allows the player to feel as though they are unraveling the mystery through progression and gameplay. Amnesia the Bunker is the hub part. This sounds reductive in a way, but it isn't. The design philosophy of the bunker is substance and experience over quantity. The game is only about 4 hours long. The bunker is a tight experience. While there is some clunk, I feel like that just comes with physics-based engines from the 2010s, and has a serious pedigree with the franchise, running all the way back to Penumbra. I find this adds tension and a degree of tangible reality to the experience. If I get stuck on something or have trouble interacting with something, it makes it feel heavy and real and in my way, like I'm clawing and scrambling and sweating to get free because of the stress. I am literally fumbling my hands, like those people in horror movies we always roll our eyes at when they accidentally drop the keys or the flashlight while they're being chased by the killer. I'm being a little dramatic, but it's only because this game has genuinely made me feel like I should try and convince people to play it, which is very uncommon these days. And I do mean these days. I wouldn't judge you if you looked at the bunker and assumed it came out around 2010 or 2015. The game came out in 2023. This rough around the edges visual quality is not an issue to me. I believe it enhances the experience, but that could just be my nostalgia talking. In the behind-the-scenes content that Frictional has put out, they explain that the game is made on an older engine and was originally designed to be DLC for Rebirth, but they utilize this aging technology to its absolute strengths. In my humble opinion, the game looks great and really nails the tone in every aspect. Also, a quick shout out to frictionalgames' YouTube channel. They had incredible behind-the-scenes interviews, and they all seem like such genuine and passionate people, which is so incredibly refreshing to see in the scope of modern gaming. Frictionalgames, please never change. With some of the preliminary context taken care of and the Yap Sesh well underway by now, let's talk about why Amnesia the Bunker is the best survival horror experience I've played since a 12-year-old me first sat down to play The Dark Descent all those years ago. We'll do some light comparisons to other games and get into this fantastically personal and harrowing story, fueled by Lovecraftian and brutalist themes of war and life and what lies beyond, all punctuated by a monster design that is a breath of fresh air for the series, and one that will live on in my inspirations for years to come. The bunker's biggest virtue is its constant presentation of issues that need to be solved and mechanics that need to be learned, as well as calling back to and applying previously learned things in order to progress. A good game utilizes every gameplay mechanic at a player's disposal by the end of it, and that's the crux of it, by the end of it. I would argue that we are still learning new things and methods of navigation and problem solving all the way up till the end of the game, and the more experimental and attentive you are with the way the physics puzzles and equipment work, the more rewarded you will be in the end. And the icing on the cake is the crucial resource and story components of the game are randomized each time you hit New Game, and the New Game Plus allows even further randomization options. Anyway, let's touch briefly on the story before talking about some of the finer details. The tutorial part of the game begins with the main characters being introduced. Henri Clement and Augustin Lambert, two soldiers and good friends in the French army in 1916 in the battle of either the Somme or maybe Verdun. I don't think it actually says, but if it does, please let me know. These two take turns saving each other. First Lambert by giving Henri a gas mask during an enemy raid, and then Henri saves Lambert after he is thrown into a cavernous hole by artillery. Henri gives Lambert a drink from a nearby spring, and this seemingly simple expression of nurturing concern is incredibly important. But we will circle back to this choice later, even though I'm sure all of you already know the story of this game. All of this is done so quickly, and yet this game is able to communicate that these two characters care about one another, and that they are tragically subject to the brutality of the First World War. Henri heroically attempts to save his unconscious friend. He's sprinting through the battlefield with Lambert over his shoulders and is being pursued by Germans. A piece of artillery lands near him, knocking him unconscious. He wakes alone in the bunker after an unknown amount of time, suffering from amnesia due to the blast. This is such a simple premise, but World War I is such a horrifyingly perfect setting for tales of great suffering and the macabre nature of humanity. Sprinkle in the supernatural and the possibilities seem so ripe for horror fanatics. Anyway, so now we're in the bunker. Here is the objective. Escape the bunker. Simple. There are 3 living people we encounter in the bunker. The first one is a fine gentleman who wants Henri to shoot him with a gun. We do not get to do this. The other two will come up later in the story, but this is the first time in an Amnesia game that the player is empowered in any way other than their ability to hide or traverse the environment. We have a revolver. This thing is not only a deadly weapon, but a very loud key as well. We blast or smash a lock and we are in the safe room with a lamp that allows us infinite saves, a storage box, and a fuel generator that can turn on the lights, which apparently the monster hates. This seems pretty cush so far. Then we step out into the bunker halls. I can't be the first one that walked down the hall, heard a noise, and went right back to the safe room to make sure I did, in fact, save my game, right? The dread and sense of oppression in this game are a masterclass onto themselves. The cycle of teeth-gritting tension being cut by intermittent puzzle solving, adrenaline-fueled monster encounters, realizing the generator is surely going to run out, only to attempt a mad dash back with supplies in tow, or a methodic and sweaty, heart-pounding crawl back to the safe room in the pitch dark. And before long the gameplay loop presents itself to the player, and a roguish light bulb should go off in the player's head at this point. This loop of survival and management and thrill is utterly addicting. Henri needs the dynamite and the detonator handle to escape, by blasting open the bunker's main entrance. But these components are locked away under layers of keys and puzzles and locked doors and codes to lockers with crucial items that lead Henri all around the bunker and even deep below it. Along the way, Henri will rediscover what happened here through written accounts left behind by his fellow soldiers. All the while, he will have to deal with the mutated rats that feast on his dead comrades, and something else. Within the dark and ravaged halls of this subterranean bunker, there is something following us. We already had a brief encounter with it, but we weren't exactly sure what we saw. We wander around in the evidence of its wake. Bloody, half-mutilated bodies, blood stains, and strange holes dug into the concrete walls. Then we encounter it, hearing it at first before we finally lay eyes upon it. The beast. What makes a good monster in a stalker game? Is it the appearance, the sound, and how persistent it is? I believe the answer is simple. How unpredictable it is. Many people compare the beast in the bunker to the alien in Alien Isolation, and I understand why. Both creatures make the player feel a similar sense of constant dread and pursuance. Both creatures appear to be free-thinking and truly intelligent. I would argue, however, that the weaknesses of Alien Isolation, wherein there is a large portion of the game where the alien is no longer present, are completely absent in the bunker. There is a very small segment of the game where the player is technically safe from the beast while not being in the safe room, but in that area the player is anything but relaxed or bored. Outside of that short instance, the player is being stalked 100% of the time. While the monster on normal difficulty is somewhat unpredictable, on harder difficulty, which I highly recommend, the monster is very unpredictable. There were at least 2 or 3 times where I had genuinely frightening, cinematic, and seemingly random encounters with the creature while roaming the halls despite my best efforts to play by the rules, so to speak. And while I had the initial, oh shit, reaction in these moments, if I managed to get away or even if I didn't, I was still grinning from ear to ear. I've had similar experiences in Alien Isolation as well, where it seemed as though the alien was one step ahead, or I got a chance to observe it behaving like the monster in the movies. The Beast in the Bunker doesn't have a decades-long movie franchise to help suspend the player's disbelief of it, though. It has to stand strong on its own merits and its own behaviors, and it does this very well. Part of the reason, I believe, why the creature feels scarier at times in this game, outside of the setting, which I will touch on shortly and does a monstrous amount of heavy lifting, is that the map is small enough for the creature to roam freely, and it does this. To my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the monster responds to environmental triggers and investigates them, like noises and player actions, i.e. winding your flashlight or dropping something heavy. And there are degrees of this that range in severity that prompt different levels of reaction from the monster. What this means, however, is that the Beast in the Bunker is always trying to follow you around. When you hear it in the walls, you are actually hearing it, and it is trying to figure out where you are. Similar to the alien, This creature has a menace gauge type of system that pulls it away if it's being too aggressive, but also ramps it up when it's been too passive, or if the player is being too aggressive. The difference, I think, is that the alien in isolation is kinda cheating. I explained the finer details briefly in my alien isolation video, but part of its macro AI is always aware of the player, so the alien will never drop down in BFE where the player isn't. To my understanding, the beast is technically fair and doesn't have a director AI second brain, so to speak, just a complex behavior tree and a menace meter. Another layer to this is that within the bunker we can limit the behavior of the monster if we keep the lights on by putting fuel in the generator. On normal difficulty, it's entirely possible to only run out of fuel and encounter the beast a handful of times, but on higher difficulty levels where resources are more scarce, this more aggressive beast is far more prevalent and you will be in the darkness far more often. Even the behavior of the monster is tied to an in-game resource or pickup, subject to randomization and player management. This philosophy is so crucial to the experience. Everything you do has consequences. You can game the monster as much as you want to, but eventually, Amnesia the Bunker forces you to go loud. Inevitably, there will be a wooden door that you need to get through. And while breaking it down with a giant cement block is quieter than blasting it open with a grenade, both make noise, and both will get the attention of the monster. Guns and grenades will always bring the monster. Other environmental noises will stack up, which eventually draw it out. Or if it is already out, then yeah. I'm sure that the creature's AI is more complicated than I'm making it sound, but there are people far more knowledgeable about this subject than myself, and I can link their channels in the description for you, so give that a look. So what ends up happening is the player will either stumble or cruise their way into the mid-game, and then when all the systems are running smoothly and the player begins making plans and executing them and solving problems by crafting items for defense and distraction, the monster will change as well. Not in a drastic way, but in a subtle one. Suddenly, 1 or 2 pistol rounds aren't cutting it anymore. I need a second grenade now to make the thing fuck off? It's looping back around to check places way more often while I'm hiding. It's waiting by the safe room when I try to run back. It's sitting in the dark somewhere where it's hard to see, unmoving, patiently waiting. The thing cut me off. It learned. Of course, this is kind of an illusion, but it makes the tension continue to escalate. The vibe shifts. Things become more and more desperate. It is as much a battle of wits as it is a game of cat and mouse. Now the game is firing on all cylinders. This is peak Amnesia the Bunker right here. Looting, resource management, light management, self-defense, taking risks, solving puzzles, uncovering the tragic mystery, uncovering the grander, more cosmic mystery. This game is an absolute masterpiece. And like any great horror legend, I believe the design of the beast is a masterclass as well. If you look at the model of the creature in perfect T-pose lighting, it may not seem that creative. In fact, it looks a little goofy, kind of like Sloth from the Goonies mixed with those snake people from Sin's Fortress or Archdragon Peak in Dark Souls. But that isn't the impression you get in the game at all. The beast has prominent features, like any good monster. It's got a big mouth with teeth, big claws, unnatural looming posture. But the head and face are so large and exaggerated. The claws are comically large. The back legs seem disproportionately small, like a gorilla. But if you shroud this thing in darkness and only catch a glimpse of it, these exaggerated features become incredibly effective. This may be a shot in the dark, so to speak, but if you haven't heard of a guy called Trevor Henderson online, then give his work a look up at your own peril. He and many of the modern sort of ARG or analog horror type people that create creatures designed to be viewed briefly or in just a frame or to be hidden within media are experts at making a simple glimpse of something extremely evocative. I'm sure you've heard of some of his work like The Siren Head, or if maybe not his stuff, then you've heard of others that exist in an analog internet horror classic like Greylock or Local 58, even The Boiled One, a couple of SCPs, so on and so on. These kinds of creature designs have to be striking in 2 dimensions, and I believe that the beast in the bunker follows similar design principles. Its head and its face are large. Its mouth opens unnaturally wide. It has dark, black, doll-like or shark-like eyes. Its face seems literally split down the middle between human and beast features. Its skin is sickly looking and badly damaged. The swords jammed into its torso and its posture give it a hard to discern and unnatural silhouette. Its hands are massive, scythe-tipped fingers that it walks around on the knuckles of like an ape. In action and in the light, this thing is a good design. But in the Amnesia series, when you view a monster, your vision blurs at the edges, and this grating, siren-like Silent Hill-ass chase music kicks in. On top of that, the game is dark, and this thing jerks and jitters around in heavy, contrasted shadows. When we see the beast in Amnesia the Bunker, we're seeing a picture of it at a time. Literally framed by the claustrophobic halls of the bunker, it has to capture our attention and evoke horror in just a few frames in just a few seconds, just like the oddly brilliant designs of a Trevor Henderson monster, or the brief and confusing close-up of the xenomorph's mouth in Alien. I think kind of ironically that the only other game in recent memory that evoked a similar feeling in me upon seeing the monster was in the infamous fetus monster Escape in Resident Evil 8. Now, visuals are simply one component of this thing. There is also the sound design, its animations, and the way it interacts with the game world. The sound design in this game is some of the best I've ever heard. Soundtrack, special effects, the monster, the voice acting, all of it is top-notch. The monster sounds wet and labored. It grumbles, growls, roars, screeches, and also, if you listen closely, it speaks. And if you listen closely enough, the monster's identity is revealed at a certain point in the game. It was formerly human, which is a whole new layer of body horror. The beast uses tunnels it has burrowed into the walls of the bunker to navigate the map unseen, similar to the vents in Alien Isolation. It also uses these vents in a similar way. If you listen, then you will know where the monster is and what state it's in, so to speak. Whether it is laying near a hole in ambush, or it has exited a hole to begin searching. The bunker does this thing that seemingly all of my favorite horror games and movies also do, where the protagonist and or group is dropped into an unfamiliar location that they become trapped in. Evidence of the supernatural or beastly bad thing is all around them, but they don't seem to notice or don't put 2 and 2 together until it's too late. That moment of realization is enthralling to me. In Alien, it's the derelict scene. In Aliens, it's the hive scene. In The Descent, it's when they discover the den of bones. In Event Horizon, it's when they discover the translation on the tape from the crew. In Dead Space, it's when they discover that something is in the room with us, etc., etc. These moments are my lifeblood as a horror creature feature enjoyer. Now, when we look for that in the bunker, one might say that moment for Henri is when the dude gets yoinked through the wall and we get his gun. That's perfectly reasonable. I think, however, that this happens early enough in the game that there is another moment where this sort of reveal of the truth formula is more pertinent. A moment that is based entirely on player choice and can happen a little earlier or a little later depending on the playthrough, but regardless it has the same effect. The moment I'm referring to, and in my opinion, is when the player first enters the chapel. This moment changes things. This moment is when the creature goes from beast to monster. We discover, by walking into this unholy gore nest, that the beast isn't just some animal trying to eat everything it can, like the rats or a lion hunting an antelope. It is malicious. It wants not just to kill, but to hurt people, to torture them. Veterans of the franchise will understand why this is, but the spectacle that this room provides is truly shocking. A holy place turned into a lair of hellish torment. The monster chose this location for that reason. The irony, the blaspheme, paired with a place that perhaps the more human side of the beast tried to seek comfort in. Now all the bodies on the ground and the terrified words of the fallen soldiers, scribbled hastily into notebooks and scraps of paper, carry much more weight. The implications for Henri's friend Augustin Lambert are also far darker now.
11th of July 1916, dusk. I sit now at the bedside of my dear friend Henri Clément. The doctor has left, but I remain. I feel I must record the extraordinary twists of fate and fortune that have led me to be here, breathing, alive, strong and well, while Henri lies unconscious, fighting for his life. It starts days ago. On a night patrol, I fell into some kind of pit. I was injured, unable to move, unable to escape. By all rights, it should have been my tomb. I cried for help, screamed myself hoarse. The effort left me parched, exhausted, and still alone. As the next night fell, as I cried what might have been my last cry for help, I could see the stars high above, beautiful, indifferent. And then Clément's face appeared at the top of the pit. He lowered himself to me, found a trickle of spring water there, and had me drink from it. It was cool and crisp, with a strange, sweet taste. Never has water felt more nourishing than that. Administered by a dear friend's hand. I was saved. But of course, that is not the last twist fate's blade would stab into my back. 11th of July, 1916. Night. Later now, I continue my tale. As Clément carried me across no man's land, fate struck again. A German outpost spotted us. Gunfire, explosions, desperation. And as the air cleared, I pulled myself to my feet and saw that Henri was wounded, blood pouring from his head, his eyes glassy. He was fading. I do not know where I found the strength to carry him, but carry him I did, all the way back to our bunker. 12th July, 1916. Morning. Woke this morning and realized that a toy I purchased for my son is gone. I promised him I'd bring him something home from the front, so I brought him a stuffed rabbit from a local shop. A rabbit because he thinks he's so fast. It must have fallen from my pack when I fell into the crater. The thought of that stuffed rabbit lying in that crater, rain and weather matting its fur, unloved, forgotten, totally alone, lost forever. It fills me with profound hopelessness. 12th July 1916. Afternoon. Spoke to the doctor. He told me Henri woke in the night and had no recollection of the events in the crater. Indeed, he seemed even confused as to where he was. Aside from this disturbing news, I'm feeling rather good. Stronger and stronger. As if the whole ordeal has filled both my body and soul with new purpose.
I've yapped for a while now, so I figure it's time to get to the conclusion of this thing. When Henri gave Augustin the sip from the pool of water in the crater at the beginning of the game, he damned him. But in reality, he damned him even before then, before the events of the game. Henri was ordered to go on a scouting mission into no man's land, a solo op that often led to death. In a drunken bit of revelry with his fellow soldiers, and in an act of petty revenge for previously harmless pranks, Henri played a game of dice with Augustin over who would be sent out on mission, and Henri cheated, sending Lambert in his place. The game begins with our guilt-ridden mission to go out and save our beloved friend after we had a chance to come to our senses. At this point, Lambert had been missing for several days. They find each other, the aforementioned events happen, and that cool spring water Henri gave Lambert was actually the otherworldly vitae the French had discovered in the ancient Roman ruins hidden deep beneath the bunker. This vitae turns Lambert into the beast. Pretty obvious in retrospect, but if you never played Rebirth, this might have come as more of a surprise. Henri is literally being chased by a manifestation of his guilt. This is great monster design. I guess I could have mentioned that part of the story earlier, but the French were digging. Originally they were digging under the German line to attempt to ambush them, but they dug too greedily and too deep, one wise wizard might say. They ended up across Roman ruins deep below the bunker, ruins of some ancient and supposed ritual site. I don't want to delve too deeply into this because there are very well-written logs in the game detailing how the workers down in the ruins saw and heard and experienced supernatural things, and one in particular, who was still alive up until we meet him, claims he was having visions of another world. The man, Toussaint, went crazy and carved out his own eyes and is now wandering around in the dark with a shotgun. We take care of that issue in one way or another. This is one of my favorite sequences in the game, and there are a lot of details I could get into here about the ancient Roman ruins leading us to some otherworldly and uncontrollable force that corrupts men into monsters, is such a Lovecraftian idea and right at the heart of the Amnesia series. In fact, it reminds me heavily of Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem, which is a fantastic game that came out on the GameCube, I think, back in 2002. I won't get into it now, but the game features themes that the Amnesia series also shares. If you know, then you know. In the end, Henri must decide to either escape or to try and destroy the monster he created. I interpret this choice as Henri putting Lambert out of his misery and protecting the outside world from this monster and taking ownership for his actions, or Henri continuing to run from his guilt, regardless of how many more people get hurt because of his choices. If Henri chooses to be rid of the beast to put Lambert down once and for all he needs to do is lure the beast out onto a wooden scaffold in the giant blue lightning sci-fi ruins chamber dangling precariously above a bottomless black void at the bottom that contains the shadow from the first Amnesia game, and drop a grenade at its feet. This destroys the scaffold and sends the beast to the pit, seemingly to its death. Or Henri can just avoid the monster and run to the exit. In one ending, Henri sees the beast emerge from the bunker and run off into no man's land to wreak havoc on the front lines, which sounds pretty horrible but also pretty metal. But in both, we are quickly reminded of the brutal and unfair nature of war. In conclusion, this game rocks. It's a tight and short experience that begs to be replayed and offers a fantastic degree of difficulty and feature customization with incredible opportunity for challenge and speedruns. I highly recommend this game to any horror fans out there, and to that effect, I highly recommend the Amnesia series in general. I had a great time playing and making this video, and I wanted to thank those of you who stuck around to the end. If you enjoy this sort of thing, please like and subscribe. I started this channel to engage in discussions with people about my favorite games and to share my opinions of them with people online. It was also a great excuse for me to engage in my artwork a bit more, as the regular 9-to-5 grind of late 20s life with a family and children can sometimes make the days fly by, and before you know it, the hobbies we had as young creatives have been lost to the wayside. I didn't want that to happen to me, so thank you for the opportunity to let me share. Right now, this channel is operated by me and my little brother. I do all of the scripting and the drawings and the gameplay recordings, and he helps me edit these videos and get them on YouTube. No generative AI is used for the scripting or drawing process, and I know that to some that may not matter too much, but to me it does. I had given up on being creative. I was in a bad place in life and was struggling with addiction and a sense of impending doom, scrolling on social media, watching the world fall apart in front of my eyes, and the creative spaces on the internet getting flooded with slop AI content. I decided to do this little project here, and my mental health has really benefited from this. I'm not trying to grandstand here, well, maybe a little bit, but it has helped me feel a sense of peace by actively contributing to this medium of human-created writing and visual art. I usually obsess over stuff, be it movies or games or stories, and this channel has helped me feel a sense of finality with my constantly wandering interests. I also used to never share my art with anyone, and posting it online has helped my confidence quite a bit. I strive to make each video better, and I hope that y'all stick around if this is something you enjoy. Anyway, thank you for watching, and go be creative.